Welcome to Recognised Audio Edition. I'm Merisha Stevenson. Every week I explore the psychology of credibility, visibility and authority, and why some people, ideas and organisations become recognised while others remain overlooked. This week I want to explore a question that sits right at the heart of professional visibility. Why do some experts become the default voice of an industry? They're not the only voice, not necessarily the smartest voice, and not even always the most experienced voice. But they are the default voice. The person journalists call first, the person conference organisers immediately think of, the person producers contact when a story breaks, the person whose name seems to come up again and again. Because if we're honest, we've all seen it happen. The same names appear repeatedly, the same people are invited onto panels, the same contributors are quoted, the same speakers are booked. And every time that happens, somebody's left wondering why. Sometimes that person is equally qualified, occasionally they're more qualified. So what's actually going on? Well, for a long time, I think we've answered the question too simply. We say it's networking or visibility or luck. And whilst all those things can play a role, I think they miss something much more important. Trust. Because over the years, both as a broadcaster and as an executive facilitator, I've come to realise that opportunities don't usually flow to the people with the strongest CV. They flow to the people that decision makers trust. Now, before anyone gets upset, I'm not saying expertise don't matter. Of course they do. But expertise alone don't determine opportunity. Trust does. And trust is what authority positioning is really about. Not manufacturing credibility, making existing credibility easier to recognise. One of the most influential concepts in behavioural psychology is something called the availability heuristic. Developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, the principle is surprisingly simple. When people need to make decisions quickly, they rely on what comes most readily to mind. They don't search every possible option. They work from a shortlist. And that matters because most professional decisions happen under pressure. A producer needs a contributor, an organiser needs a speaker, a journalist needs a quote, a board needs a facilitator. They're not conducting an exhaustive search of everyone who could possibly do the job. They're working from the people they know, remember and trust. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because they're busy. And there's a difference. I've seen this from both sides. As a broadcaster, when I need somebody to contribute to a conversation, I don't just need expertise. I need someone who can communicate, somebody who can connect with an audience, who can explain a complex issue clearly, and who I trust to deliver. Likewise, when organisations bring me back year after year to facilitate events, it isn't because they've forgotten other facilitators exist. It's because uncertainty has been removed. They know how I work, they trust the outcome, and the trust makes decisions easier. This is why I often think conversations about personal branding miss the point, because authority isn't really about being louder or posting more or becoming internet famous. Authority is trust made visible. It's ensuring that your expertise is visible enough, consistent enough, and memorable enough that people think of you when opportunities arise. And that is where many brilliant professionals really do get stuck, because they assume opportunities are isolated events, a podcast appearance, a media interview, a panel discussion, a keynote. But opportunities rarely exist in isolation. They compound. One appearance creates another. One interview leads to another invitation. One successful contribution builds confidence, and confidence builds trust. Psychologist Robert Cialdini described this through the principle of social proof. When we see each other repeatedly choosing someone, we begin to assume there's a reason. If a person keeps appearing on panels, podcasts, stages, and media platforms, those appearances become signals. The market notices. People begin to think, if others trust them, perhaps I can too. And that's where recognition starts becoming self-reinforcing. Which brings us back to the original question. Why do some experts become the default voice of an industry? I don't think it's because they're always the most qualified. I think it's because they've accumulated enough trust, familiarity, and authority to become the obvious choice. And once somebody becomes the obvious choice, opportunities begin flowing differently. The goal then isn't simply to become known. It's to become known for something specific, valuable, and credible enough that people remember you when opportunities arise. Because ultimately, the default voice is rarely the loudest voice. It's usually the voice that people trust most. And trust more often than not begins with recognition. Thanks for listening to Recognised Audio Edition. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll find the full essay and previous editions over on Substack. And remember, recognition isn't about just being seen, it's about being understood. Until next time, stay credible, stay visible, and most importantly, stay recognised.